Hi, Peggy here. We just wrapped up our first general session of the Chapter Academy 2021, and it's super exciting. We have lots of great conversations. I'm here to just check in on the concept that we discussed today. Now, you might recall, we talked about what? We talked about member engagement, and I showed you an engagement continuum that allows us to begin to look at how do members want to connect. Now, the reality is that COVID really turned upside down how members engage in our chapters. We had to do this digital or virtual pivot. The reality is, though, even leading up to that, we were struggling in some cases to get people to our events or to get them to volunteer. It's because the concept, the way people want to engage has been changing. And COVID, it just pushed it further and gives us an opportunity now to sort of rethink or recast engagement. That's what we wanted you to do. Now, in general, we find that we tend to stay on the top of the line, right? We tend to think in terms of event attendance, right? Those are getting people in the seats, right, to a particular organized event or activity participation. Again, it's usually a big event and we want them to be there at the same time. And of course, my favorite, volunteering. We obviously want folks, but oftentimes we think about it in terms of a board or a committee position. So engagement has to be much more micro-oriented. It has to be almost in the moment. And as we talked about, the research coming out of COVID said it's got to be about creating personal connections. People want to be able to talk to folks and get access to the industry information, the here and now, to make them, well, in some cases, do their job better, help them be more equipped for their job. But in some cases, it's at least to be able to have that connection with someone who understands them, which is why it makes sense for us to spend more time on the second level, or the bottom level, if you will, of engagement. And I'm talking really about three different things that we can be doing. The first is going to be community building. What I'm talking about here is really being a matchmaker, pulling together members, helping them find each other, helping them create connections and really their own community within your community. This could be things like, for example, what you're seeing here is a podcast, a way of lifting up members and sharing member stories. It could be that it could be simply a simple mentoring program where you bring 2 people or 3 people or 4 people together. It could be something really small and focused, like we do coffee with, and we do it by discipline. So we get people that are particularly interested in a certain piece of content or a certain part of their job. And we have very small coffee with. Sometimes we have 3 people, sometimes we have 12 people. But the point being is it's small community building, helping people have these conversations in which they can get a little deeper, get to know people a little bit more. Community building, lots of different ways to do that. Social media engagement. So let's really talk about digital engagement. The reality is we struggle to get people to our events or even sometimes to give our volunteering. Why? Because we're asking them to do it on your time or my time, as opposed to their time. Sometimes we just can't fit into people's schedules, but we can have things that are accessible to them. Social media or digital media is a great way of doing that. So whether or not it's your e-letter that goes out and shares information and content, whether it's your Facebook group or your LinkedIn page, or maybe, just maybe, it's a very limited kind of email group. We call it our writer's pool. And it's an opportunity for us to pitch an idea out there and ask people what they're interested in. The writer's pool feeds into what goes on our blog, feeds into our e-letter, in fact, feeds into almost everything we do. So I've seen people do a writer pool and social media pool. I've also seen them do hot topic pools where basically they sign up, yeah, if there's something to be discussed about X, I want to be there. So maybe it's creating that focused email group. Very simple. Maybe, just maybe, it's this idea of having a Survey Monkey, a regular Survey Monkey poll, or maybe you use a Google Doc to collaborate on a particular question or a topic. One of the things that we do for one of our other management clients is webinars. They're 30-minute webinars where we have a member that shares something they just solved and people come into it. Again, sometimes very few, sometimes a lot of people. And the last thing I want to talk about is this conversation around content. Because at the end of the day, it's the content that people want. Yes, sometimes it's from talking to an individual, but many times it's from having access to something at the moment of need. You guys have content. You've got stories, you've got examples, you've got links to share. Create engagement around that content. All right. In the deep dive, we're going to ask you to really focus on these three. And we're not saying don't talk about volunteering, don't talk about event attendance, don't talk about activity participation, but we'd like to really see what you can do to say, how do I get my members connected in this organization, particularly in this time as we're moving back to in-person, but we're not quite there. Have great conversations.